The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. Chapter 9. Battle of the Sexes. Dawkins discusses that sexual behavior is a relationship of mutual mistrust and mutual exploitation, as suggested by Trivers. Both the father and mother have 50% of the genetic shareholding in the same children, so there is an advantage to cooperate, but also an incentive for one parent to get away with investing less than the fair share or forcing the other parent to invest more. The optimal strategy to maximize the spread of your genes would be to copulate with as many members of the opposite sex as possible, usually done by the males. Dawkins points out that maleness and femaleness are arbitrary labels, and the only reliable indicator in all animals and plants is that sex cells or gametes of males are much smaller and numerous than the gametes of females. This means females contribute far more in food reserves than males. The implication for this is that it places a limit on the number of children females can have, but males can have virtually unlimited children. This is not true for asexual species, for example fungi and snails, where individuals are not distinguishable into two sexes, so anybody can mate with anybody else. There is no sperm and egg, and all the sex cells are the same, called isogametes. Therefore, each partner's contribution is the same. The possible evolution of the asymmetry of gametes from isogametes is theorized by Geoffrey Parker and others, explaining how two divergent sexual strategies evolved. They propose that when all sex cells were interchangeable, some may have been bigger, an advantage over average-sized gametes, by giving them a larger initial food supply, and therefore push the evolutionary trend towards larger gametes. However, this would have allowed selfish exploitation by smaller gametes provided they could cash in on the bigger ones, hence by increasing mobility and volume. Natural selection favored exploiters' smaller gametes that sought out bigger gametes, which became immobile because they would be chased by the exploiter anyway. If one male can produce enough sperm to impregnate hundreds of females, wouldn't it make males less numerous than females? Wouldn't males be expendable as females were more valuable to the species? For example, 4% of males accounted for 88% of all copulations observed in elephant seals, and most males never get a chance to copulate, but still ate up the population's food resources. R.A. Fisher explains that male and female ratios tend to be equal. All eggs can develop into males or females. The sex determination gene is in the chromosome carried by the sperm and deferring one chromosome only. Hence on average half the sperm are male and half are female. If we suppose that genes are tending towards one sex or the other, are any of them likely to become more numerous in the gene pool? Suppose if in elephant seals a mutation arose that tended to make parents have more daughters. This would shift the sex ratio towards a surplus of females. However, just a few males can provide all the sperms needed, and those investing in sons will have a genetic advantage, and genes producing sons will eventually become more numerous. The strategy of producing an equal number of sons and daughters is evolutionarily stable. However, sex ratios could be unequal if there were unequal amounts of resources invested into sons and daughters, but these would be the exceptions rather than the norm. Females stand to lose more if the children die than the father because she has a high investment in the form of a large, food-rich egg and the commitment of childbirth. If she abandoned the children in the care of the father and went off with another male, the father could retaliate by abandoning the baby. She would need to invest more to bring a new substitute child. Hence, during the early stages of child development, the father has a high probability of abandoning the child rather than the mother. There are many species where the father works hard and faithfully care for their offspring, although there is evolutionary pressure to bear offspring with different partners. This differs from species to species. For example, in birds of paradise, females receive no help from males in the rearing of her children. In contrast, kittiwakes form monogamous pair bonds and cooperate in bringing up children. This would depend on if the penalty attached to selfish mate exploitation outweighs the benefit. For example, if a father deserts the mother and the child, and the female still has a reasonable chance of rearing the child by her own. Mothers may try to trick other males into rearing children as their own. natural selection will penalize gullibility in such males. The Bruce effect, discovered by Hilda Bruce, is the tendency of pregnant female mouse to abort their pregnancy if the smell of another male rodent is different from that of her former mate. Hence, male lions, new to a pride, sometimes murder existing cubs, presumably because they are not their children. Females that cannot convince a male to adopt her children may decide to rear the child herself. More resources will be required if the child is younger than older. A female in danger of being deserted might also walk out on the male before he walks out on her. Males can also enforce a period of prolonged courtship before he copulates with a female, drive away other males who approach her, and wait to see if she is pregnant with other stepchildren. For a female, she can refuse to copulate and potentially drive a hard bargain before she copulates. Dawkins explains two strategies, domestic bliss and the He-Man strategy. Remember, strategy in this instance refers to a blind, unconscious behavioral program. Under the domestic bliss strategy, the female tries to spot signs of fidelity and domesticity in the male. She can play hard to get for a long time, and any male that is not patient enough to wait until she consents to copulate is not likely to be a good bet as a faithful husband. The female can weed out casual suitors and finally copulate with a male who has proven his qualities of fidelity and perseverance in advance, like her pre-copulation investment, building a nest, feeding her substantial food. Feminine coyness and prolonged courtship are very common among animals. Dawkins disputes the reasoning that heavy investment by the male in the female will deter the male from deserting her, unless we assume that females will welcome males who have deserted their wives. Maynard Smith assumes two female strategies, coy and fast, and two male strategies, faithful and philanderer. In this scenario, coy females will not copulate with males until he has gone through a long and expensive courtship period. Fast females will copulate immediately with anybody. Faithful males are prepared to go on courting for a long time, and after copulation, stay with the female and help her rear the young. Philanderer males lose patience quickly if females will not copulate with them straight away, and after copulation, do not stay. We can assume that every child reared is plus 15 points each. Rearing a child requires 20 points, but if it's shared, then only 10 points each. Wasting time is minus 3 points. Firstly, in the situation with coy females and faithful males, the payout will be 15 minus 10 minus 3, which equals plus 2. In a situation with the introduction of a fast female, payout will be 15 minus 10, which equals plus 5. However, if the fast female starts to dominate, the philanderer male rises in the population and does better than his faithful rivals. Payoff for the fast female equals 15 minus 20 points, which equals minus 5 points, and for the philanderer male, plus 15 points. This scenario seems to be an endless oscillation. However, the system will converge on a stable state, being 5-6 coy females and 5-8 faithful males. The analysis depends on the arbitrary number we assign, but the point here is any tendency to deviate from an appropriate stable ratio will be penalized to the advantage of the deviant in order to preserve the evolutionarily stable state. Demanding prospective males to build a nest might be an effective strategy for the female to trap him. Females may also assign some difficult and costly deeds, such as slaying a dragon or climbing a mountain, before consenting to copulation. However, females that impose a less arduous task, but more useful to her and her children, will have an advantage over more romantically minded females demanding pointless labours of love. In courtship, the male can also feed the female. In birds, this is regarded as a kind of regression to juvenile behaviour on the part of the female. Courtship feeding is an investment by the male and reduces the disparity between the two parents in their initial investment in the young. In the case of the male mantis, he sacrifices himself to the larger female who he mates for the benefit of his children. However, males who can deceive females by concealing a strong tendency towards desertion and unfaithfulness have a strong advantage. The philanderer stands a strong chance of passing on more genes than an honest rival. Hence genes for effective deception will be favoured and passed on. Conversely, natural selection will tend to favour females who become good at seeing through such deception. They can do this by playing hard to get when courted by a new male, but quickly accept the advances of last year's mates in successive breeding. Hence, faithful fathers have an advantage in second or subsequent years of a mother's life. The ability to detect deceitful behaviour has kept deceit at a fairly low level. Although parental devotion in birds and mammals are rare, this behaviour is common in fish. T.R. Carlyle applies Trivers' ideas of cruel blind to explain this. As most fish do not copulate but spew out sex cells into the water, fertilization takes place in open waters, not inside the partners, which is probably how sexual reproduction first began. This is not possible for land-based animals because sex cells are vulnerable to drying up. If sperm was introduced into the female, it allows time for the male to vanish, forcing the female into the cruel blind of whether to abandon her children to death. Therefore, maternal care is more common among land animals than paternal care. In water-dwelling animals, the female is not left holding the baby, and each partner can make a getaway. In this case, males are more vulnerable to being deserted because females are usually the partner who spawns first, as eggs can stay together longer. Whereas sperms are lighter and likely to diffuse faster than eggs. Males therefore cannot spawn too early, therefore females have the advantage of forcing the male into the dilemma. In the He-Man situation, the female resigns themselves to getting no help from the father of the children and focus on good genes instead. They withhold copulation to detect males with good genes. Hence, only a small percentage of males can copulate and get away with a selfish exploitation strategy, such as the elephant seal. The female looks for evidence that points to the ability to survive, especially past adulthood. A good policy might be to go for older men, but longevity is not the main evidence of virility, which ensures lots of grandchildren. Survival might be a sign that he does not take risks that allows him to reproduce. Other signs might be good muscles to catch food, long legs to run away from predators. Charles Darwin had proposed, as clarified by Fisher, that mothers should try to produce males that turn out to be the most attractive. This will allow him to copulate with many females and guarantee the most grandchildren. Hence, one of the highest qualities in a male should be sexual attractiveness. Females who mate with super attractive He-Man is more likely to have attractive sons that copulate with more females and produce more grandchildren. So a useful quality like big muscles when accepted as an attractive quality among females. Natural selection would favour it simply because they were attractive. This can have an unstable runaway effect, as in the case of tails of birds of paradise. Longer tails may have been selected by females as an indication of fit and healthy males, serving as an indicator of genetic inferiority. If there was some genetic contribution to the natural variation in male tail lengths over time, the average tail length of males in the population would increase. Females would simply look for the males with the longest tails. Any female who departs from this rule would be penalized. This would only stop if the tails were so long that it manifested a disadvantage that outweighed the advantage of sexual attractiveness. Zahavi counters Darwin's theory of sexual selection through his handicap principle. He argues that the visual appearance of strong muscles, for example, must be supported by real strong muscles, not dummy muscles, as these can be eventually detected by females. Therefore, males must not only seem to be good quality, but must be good quality. Zahavi suggests that tails like birds of paradise or peacocks, or huge antlers of deers are evolved because they were handicaps. Hence, a male bird with a long and cumbersome tail is showing off to females that he is a strong He-Man and can survive despite his tail. Dawkins uses the analogy of a woman watching two men competing in a race and one man has a sack of coal on his back. The woman will conclude that the man with the burden is the faster runner. Dawkins points out the contradiction in this theory because the handicap must be a genuine one, but will penalize the offspring as well as attracting females. So females select males who have handicaps but have other good genes, which makes the genes more numerous. This may work if the handicap only manifests in sons but not in daughters. The feasibility of this idea has been tested by mathematical geneticists such as Maynard Smith, and there is a failure to come up with a workable model. Elephant seals win and hold to the harems not by being attractive but by beating up any other males who tries to move in on the harem and any female who tries to stray. Females benefit because, with luck, her sons will inherit their father's ability to hold a harem. Females prefer to mate with males who hold territories and with males who have high status in the dominant hierarchy. Generally, males go for sexually attractive, gaudy colors and females tend to be drabber. There are two conflicting selection pressures. Bright colors attract predators and remove these from the gene pool, and sexual partners tending to remove genes for drabness. The optimal compromise for a male is different from females. Males are high risk, high reward because there are many million sperms for every egg produced by females. For females, avoidance of hybridization, mating with a member of another species, is important, as with horses and donkeys crossbred, producing a mule that is sterile as an adult despite the considerable investment by the female. Males who mate with the wrong species gain nothing, but also lose nothing from the mistake. This goes for incest mating, where there are likely genetic consequences of lethal and semi-lethal recessive genes. Females are more likely to adhere to taboos more than males. Incestuous unions tend to be older males to younger females, meaning father-daughter incest is more common than mother-son, but brother-sister incest should be the same. For humans, females perhaps play domestic bliss rather than the He-Man strategy. Mothers generally do more work raising children, and fathers often work hard to provide the material resources that are poured into children. Human societies that are promiscuous and harem-based exist, showing how for humans this is determined more by culture than by genes. An example is how females tend to dominate in advertising themselves sexually compared to males. Dawkins concludes that this seems to point to a society where females compete for males rather than vice versa.